One of the most important things for, I think, young professionals to understand is that doing the right work and doing that work exceptionally well may not be the only part of the equation to getting ahead. And what you're describing a little bit, and what I'm also thinking about, is there's understanding of the politics of an organization. And by politics, I don't mean the policy, I mean the way that things really get done.
Welcome to the Inside Forbes Council's podcast. Each episode shares transformative insights and advice from members of Forbes Councils, a group of invitation-only communities for successful executives and entrepreneurs.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen Ganoza. Welcome to Inside Forbes Councils. Today, we have my interview with Dr. Pam Schilling. Dr. Schilling is the co-founder and CEO of Archer Career and a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. We had a great discussion about professional mojo, why promoting yourself professionally isn't necessarily bragging, and how our education system may be underpreparing us in regards to the critical skill of selling oneself. Pam, thank you so much for taking the time today. Before we jump in, let's have you do a little self-introduction.
Definitely. So my name is Dr. Pam Schilling, and I am a career coach. And my area of focus is really around advancing in a career via a job search, new positions within an organization, changes to careers. And I did this after spending about close to 15 years in the corporate environment doing business strategy and helping organizations. So I do the same things for people that I did helping companies.
Awesome. Bonus question. What made you make the switch from doing business strategy at a corporate level to doing coaching at a corporate level?
I mean, the big motivation for me to go into coaching, I loved the part of my work in finance and in consulting where I impacted the profitability of an organization, of a company at an enterprise level. But I just saw a lot of gaps with human capital and how people were being able to individually impact a company. And I felt like I wanted to focus on that particular challenge. And so I made this shift into coaching, and I've really enjoyed it. And I feel a great sense of accomplishment in the relationships I build and the kind of things that the professionals and clients I have are able to do in their careers.
What is one problem that you often see with your clients in terms of like their struggle to advance in their career or to make better arrangements?
I mean, I think if I look at the struggles that people have professionally, I mean, certainly there's a range of matters. But I think one of the big things that I spend a lot of time with people on is there is something that people want to achieve professionally. Getting that achievement can seem daunting. It can seem like it's a very prestigious organization. It can seem like the interview process is really hard. And so the mountain that people have to climb is super high. And many professionals, when you're trying to do something new or unknown or difficult, you have a lot of self-talk. And I think we've all been there where you say, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe that interview process is too difficult, or I'm in a position now that I don't feel great about my standing. Maybe my boss, my manager isn't giving me a lot of recognition. And this comes down to we have a lot of self-doubt. And in the process of a job search or trying to get someplace new, I call it kind of a lack of mojo. And when you're trying to sell yourself, which is what getting a new job or getting a promotion is really about, having low mojo is really hard.
So where does the low mojo come from? Why do people experience this?
There are several places. Most of us have a performance review that we get in an organization. These days, those performance reviews often spend 80% of the time talking about where your gaps are. There are times when you don't feel like you're being heard in an organization. Maybe you've been passed over for a promotion. Maybe the ideas that you have in the organization are not being adopted. Maybe you've interviewed for one position and it didn't go well, or you never heard back from the organization. And there are many complex factors that go into the kinds of career roadblocks that we face. And I think as humans, it's just natural that we turn the cause of some of those problems towards ourselves. And that just begins that process of self doubt, and it builds. And one of the things that I try to do as a coach, I want to be both realistic and optimistic. I want to help people think about where their strengths are and where their capabilities are and how talented they are. And sometimes that talent is just overlooked by an organization. That's the bottom line.
And you mentioned the strength of being able to sell yourself, right?
Yes.
Something that came to mind was schooling and growing up. In my mind, we're taught like, oh, don't brag, don't be a show off. If you do your work, if you get good grades, good things will happen. The world is not a strict meritocracy. It's not only your work, it's how you sell yourself. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on sort of that balance. Is there something that we should be doing differently in schooling? Like just your general thoughts on that.
So the question about the educational path and how this affects us long run, personally, I'm super excited that you asked that question. So a couple of points of context. So one, I have 6-year-old twin sons who are in first grade. So schooling is an everyday, sometimes multi-minute thought process for me because I'm watching how they're being educated. I also teach myself at DePaul University here in Chicago. I teach undergraduates, I've taught MBAs. There are things that occur in a classroom that don't always simulate the way that the professional world works. And if we think about bridging first grade to college, you're striving for a grade, you're striving for a test score. In the professional world, I'm not sure that someone's ever told me that the work that I did or the presentation that I gave was a 92%. And business decisions are complicated. You make them on the front end, you see outcomes of them. Some of those outcomes are interfered with by other external factors and internal factors. And it's very impossible, in fact, to have the right answers. And so, how do we go from the educational system that's supposed to impart knowledge and understanding and perspective to a work environment where we have to deal with constant moving pieces? I think that's an enormous challenge. I see it in my clients. I work with undergrad students, I work with MBA students. I work with some of the most well-educated and impressive people you would ever see with the right credentials and amazing test scores. And everyone has the same professional doubt because we're somewhat trained to find the right answer. And I think that the way that people successfully overcome that is one, by putting themselves in academic experiences where they're doing experiential learning. And I applaud all kinds of educational systems that are introducing that. And then secondly, I think that the right managers, the right mentors that truly coach individuals, not coach like me, but give feedback in the moment, those are some of the best leaders in organizations because they're giving talent attention to help work through those changes of having the right answer versus dealing with uncertainty.
So do you think that we need a change in how we educate? Is there a place in education for like you have to be able to self-promote, you have to be able to sell yourself? Or is it just the knowledge that this is another skill set? It's not the responsibility of schooling, but it's a skill set that you need to learn, that you need to develop. Because I know, speaking from my own experience, not to brag, or maybe I should be bragging. Yeah, I did very well in school. I kind of thought the world was a meritocracy. And then, I was, for the first time, I was a victim of corporate politics. And I
Yes.
learned that it wasn't a meritocracy. Where does this training come in? Is it in the school level? Is it post school? Where do you think it'd be most advantageous to kind of like impart these skills?
So the question is around what I would describe as the difference between technical skills and kind of having this greater sensibility about how we advance in an organization. So, as you know, I mean, there's lots of measures of intelligence in the world. There's, raw intellect, and there's emotional intelligence, and there's been a lot of thinking. And, I apply some of that intelligence in the career space. And one of the most important things for, I think, young professionals to understand is that doing the right work and doing that work exceptionally well may not be the only part of the equation to getting ahead. And what you're describing a little bit, and what I'm also thinking about, is there's understanding of the politics of an organization. And by politics, I don't mean the policy. I mean the way that things really get done, how the pieces are moved, and who influences and how people influence. That is at times talked about in certain educational environments. And I think it depends on the educational institution that young people are a part of. I've taught at several universities. I mean, I live in Chicago, so I'm able to be exposed to some really great institutions. When organizations like, degree programs can offer a course to students that involves mentoring or involves discussion of organizational structure and leadership and how things really get done, that works. But I don't know that we can rely exclusively on a degree program to teach that. I think companies have to help young professionals learn about those things. I also think that managers, that's how I got my training. I was very fortunate coming out of my undergrad program to go into an organization that cared about developing young leaders. And it was both through professional development put on by the company and training, but also the managers that I worked for would take us out to lunch, or they would have a one-on-one conversation, or they would pull you aside. And some of it was the culture of the company that I worked for. I worked for Sprint at the time. Leadership development was a very, very big part of the company. We were trying to grow substantially. And then when I became the leader myself, then I gave that back. I modeled that behavior. So the final thing I would probably say is that more young professionals need to expand their understanding of what it takes to be successful in a career. And it's not just the work you do, but it's also the people that you engage with. And then how you really understand the environment of the company that you work for. And the job, I think, is multifaceted, or there's multiple responsibilities between the individual, the academic environment, and the companies and the managers that we work with. I think everybody plays a role in that.
And so you were fortunate enough to kind of learn how to do this. You imparted that wisdom to your team, I guess, when you got into a leadership position at Sprint, and now you do it now as a coach, right? So for people like me, and I'm sure a lot of your clients, like, we didn't learn this stuff. We're here now. For people who have low professional mojo or trouble in these areas, what can they do about it? What are the sorts of things that you help your clients work on?
Oh, it's a great question. So as a professional, whatever stage of your career you're in, and you're trying to build this professional competence. So a couple things that I think are super important. So one, you can do some reading, and I recommend that people read quality materials. I mean, there's some incredible academics that do research on, you know, relationships and political savvy. There's some nice materials, whether it's in, Forbes magazine or the, Wall Street Journal or other publications, Harvard Business Review. Read about leadership and really get that kind of book knowledge. That's a great starting point. The second thing is ask people. So if you're a student and you're in college, you have professors, you have guest speakers that come to your class, you have a network of alumni. there are so many people that are thirsty like me. I mean, I do plenty of networking informally outside my paid role, and we are more than happy to spend time on the phone or having coffee with young professionals. And if you're inside of an organization, I think there's a couple of things. Ask your manager. I mean, some people are incredibly intimidated by their manager. Maybe the relationship seems shaky. And one of the things that I did, and I often recommend others do, is put a lunch meeting or a coffee meeting on your manager's schedule and get out of their office. When you're in the office, you're thinking about work and all the emails you're not checking, and invite that person. And then ask that person's, I'm going to say permission. I don't mean it that way, but tell that person you really want to think more about your career and how you're impacting the company. You'd love to be able to talk to leaders in other parts of the organization. And you just want to give them a heads up that you'd like to do that, and ask for their support. And then use that relationship to help pivot into other areas of the organization to create those conversations. So the sum of all of that is you have to take the steps to have conversations and to get input from other people, and ask for both, you know, feedback that is moving you in new places and optimistic, but sometimes you also want to ask for feedback that is critical, where individuals can give you some insight about yourself that perhaps you can't see because you don't know how you behave. You're not video recording yourself and watching it after the fact. And then you take some of those strengths that you have, and then you also take some of the areas that maybe you're falling a little bit short, and then you think about how that's going to move you forward and how you want to maybe address some of those areas. Build on your strengths, and then pick an area or two that's important and build that area, close that gap. And I think those things can really make a huge difference.
I'm wondering if you can give an example of how this has worked for one of your clients. Is there a success story you can share?
Yeah, I'm thinking about an individual that I worked with for maybe close to a year. And this person fits exactly what is described and we've been talking about. So, someone that I worked with who was, one, incredibly talented, highly regarded, but this individual had been at their level in the organization for some time, several years. Number two, the scope of that role had started to not challenge the individual. They really wanted to be doing more, but everybody in the company knew the talent of this person and applauded this person and felt like this individual had brought a project to the company that was super innovative and super transformative, meaning allowing them to get into businesses that they were not previously successful in. So why was this person not getting promoted? It just was a mystery. And so when this individual and I started working together, I learned a couple things. So one, this individual was more scientific and technical, was getting an MBA, but really had grown up in the world of science. And not that that is at all problematic, other than I think, like many of us, the science training was overarching, and trying to solve the problems was overarching. What the individual was not doing was building higher level relationships in the company, and also not telling people what their personal ambitions were. So we set about for many months to kind of create a networking plan and to open up some dialogue. So this individual talked to their direct manager, mentioned that they had some interest in doing other things. That manager was comfortable with, my client reaching out to other leaders in the organization. So not only did my client go up, but they went into other divisions of the company. And over a good period of time, because organizations, they don't always move at lightning speed. But what occurred for this person is not only were they promoted, but the scope of their role increased substantially so that two organizations were merged into one so that this person could lead innovation for the company, which was a combination between R&D and marketing. And it was the perfect combination for this person because as they had finished their MBA, they were becoming more, strategic in their thinking, had a lot of passion around marketing, but then had all this incredible talent in the R&D area. And, I was so proud of this individual because, to be honest, at the start, having these conversations was not easy. This is someone who's maybe a little bit more introverted, used to a different culture. This person was not originally from, the US. And so, trying to bridge some of those cultural gaps was a challenge. But it just really shows you that sometimes taking a little bit of personal risk and asking for what you want can make an enormous difference.
It sounds like it's more like just speaking up, asking, versus then back to the school example, showing off or like,
For
uh,
sure.
yeah, yeah.
For sure. So when you're trying to advance your career, there are some pitfalls. I mean, some people can feel like you're overly ambitious. Some people can, feel like you're a careerist, that you're only building relationships to get ahead. That was something I faced as a young person, and I had a mentor give me some great advice. Quit pushing on the system. Fix things and build trust with people and you'll go far. That was the advice that I got. But I think when you talk about it broadly, we have a family friend who works in the arts, has done incredibly well, works at a major art institution in performing arts in New York City, a very coveted role. And she was telling us recently that she had this exact same conversation. And it started with, I love what I do. I think I could do more. And her boss, her manager said, that is fantastic. We need people who can do more. And I think that the beginning of that conversation, because it was focused on the organization rather than her individual needs, it just created a different dynamic. And that's probably the big piece of advice I would say when you're trying to advance your career is think about how the organization's needs can be met by your career needs. And that opens up a lot of possibility.
That is some excellent advice. Make it about how you want to contribute more. Not, I deserve this, this, and this. So Pam, for somebody who is in this kind of position, who's introverted, who doesn't know how to speak up, and they want to work with you, they like what they're hearing, how do they find out more about you, about Arch Career Partners, where to go next?
Oh, absolutely. So I have a, LinkedIn profile, Dr. Pam Schilling. I'm based in Chicago. There's lots of information about my background and others on my team. Our website is Archer Career. We are doing some really fun things to bring technology into the career space. So I have a couple of individuals along with me that do coaching. And then we have some, interesting development, taking some of these career challenges and trying to leverage technology to help individuals. One of the things I often think about, having a career coach is a real privilege. It's also a financial commitment, and not everyone can afford that financial commitment. And so we've thought a lot about serving people that perhaps just aren't in a position to hire someone like us. If you've lost your job, it's super hard to commit those financial resources. So we're thinking about that and trying to find ways to support undergraduate students, working professionals that are maybe in transition. And so our website, archercareer.com, has some of those new and emerging things. And I'm always happy to talk to individuals. I am, the others on my team, and just see if there's something that is a challenge that you're facing in your career that either in a conversation, a simple conversation might be helpful, or, there are definitely people that we work with in a more substantial way over a longer period of time, and that's certainly an option as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Stephen. Bye-bye.
If you'd like more content on promoting yourself, particularly for women,
the issue is that there is neuroscience behind how women show up different than how men show up. And there is also brain design differentials. And understanding how these two impact our behavior and leadership is key to the 21st century.
If you haven't already, check out episode 28, where Samantha Tassone explains how women can stay in strategic conversations by understanding differences in how the male and female brain are wired and using that awareness to not go silent in meetings. Well, that's all we have for today. As always, thank you for listening.
This has been Inside Forbes Councils. Please be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a member of the Forbes Councils and would like to participate in our podcast series, please email your member concierge. If you're interested in joining a Forbes Council, learn more at forbescouncils.com.